Okay. Look, basically, when I do questions and answers with groups, and I do with many different kinds of groups, wait for them. Basically, I proceed by telling you that you can ask me just about anything you want. I work with the news media. There's nothing I haven't heard. So you can ask me whatever you want. You can't possibly offend me. And if you do, that's why I carry a Glock. Never had to use it. So whatever you're interested in knowing about, whatever you're interested in, I gave you a little bit of an introduction walking around, but whatever you're interested in, I could talk to you for the next 3 or 4 hours, but I prefer to talk about things that you're interested in hearing about. So why don't you give me an idea of what that is, and then we can take it from there. Yes, sir.
How long has there been continuous Jewish life in Hebron?
Accepting the riots in 1929. The last time that I know of that there weren't Jews in Hebron was between 1100 to 1260. Up the hill from here is a very, very interesting site, which if we had more time I would take you to. I try to take all the groups I tour with up there, called Tel Hebron. Today the neighborhood is called Tel Wameda, Bofen Amami. The real name of the neighborhood is Tel Hebron. There are excavations up there that were done about 10, 11 years ago, and they found up there seals in stone. If you're familiar, you can take a look on the internet. They're called Hotamot Melech. They're seals from 2,700 years ago, the days of Cheskia Melech, King Hezekiah, and they found them up there, these seals with the word Hebron written on them in ancient Hebrew. And when they found those, the archaeologists told us, the defense minister then was Moshe Aarons, he was here, and the archaeologists who found these said that they have positive proof that Jews have lived in Hebron since the days of Avraham Avinu. So in terms of continuous Jewish presence in Hebron, with very, very few exceptions that we know of, okay, you have a presence here that goes back literally thousands of years, without exaggerating.
So obviously like rather complex security arrangements and such. So how safe do you and your community feel at this point living in Hebron?
Well, let me proceed the direct answer to your question by saying that security all around Israel is fairly complex. The best example I can give you is the first time I came to Israel as a student in 1974, and I was a little taken aback by these guys who were younger than me carrying around these little submachine guns called Uzis. But they didn't have, security people at bus stops making sure that, suicide bombers would get on buses. It's changed a little since then. Today, the situation in terms of security in Hebron is relatively good. There is heavy security. Things aren't great. Okay, it could certainly be better. But we've lived through very, very difficult times here. And today, everything, it's always relative, compared to somewhere else. But here things are relatively quiet. Not real quiet, but relatively quiet. And none of us have in terms of security, any problems living here. But perhaps just to give you a little example in terms of how we feel, back in 1997, in January of 1997, Hebron was split as part of the Hebron Accords, part of the continuation of the Oslo Accords. And part of what was transferred to the Palestinian Authority, to the Arabs, were the hills that surround us. And we warned them if they gave them those hills, they'd use them to shoot at us from. And of course, when the Second Intifada started, we called here the Oslo War, they did start shooting at us. They shot at us for 2.5 years from the hills from both sides. And it was pretty hairy. I live upstairs here in this building. They shot into my house a few times. One time they missed 2 of my kids, literally by that much. And so you ask yourself, after something like that, it shakes you up a little bit. So what happens to the kids? One of them was about 15, the other one was, 8 or 9. So the older one is today married with 4.5 kids. And she lives upstairs here across the hall from us where she lived then. In other words, she didn't get married and say it's too dangerous for me to live in Hebron. They almost killed me. I have to go somewhere else. She stayed. And my other daughter, who was younger then, just got married, and she lives down in the southern Hebron Hills in a little caravan. They call them caravanim, in a mobile home in a fairly isolated neighborhood. In other words, she's continuing in the same direction. The security issues aren't what scare us. People don't leave Hebron because they're scared or because there's a problem with security. That's not the major factor that disturbs us. It's disturbing, but it doesn't move people out of the community.
Besides that Jesus was here for thousands of years, what do you think is the biggest misconception of your community by Jews or
That's a very good question. The biggest misconception, look, that I don't. There are many misconceptions. I don't know. It's very difficult for me to put my finger just on one of them, and I have to admit, I get a lot of questions. That's not one that I've heard frequently. A lot of the questions I could answer in my sleep. I have to think about that a little bit. Probably one of the main misconceptions is the idea of the people who live here as, we're labeled. There are stereotypes, and we're labeled as, extremists, ultra, I don't know what, The media tends to portray us as something on the level of monsters and up, okay? And it's, I've asked many journalists who have spoken to me about the extremism of Hebron to define for me extremism. I define extremism as, Bader Meinhof, the IRA, Hamas and Hezbollah, the Red Brigade. I don't know. We don't go out and kill people. We don't plant bombs and blow people up. I don't view myself as an extremist. I might be I live my ideals. So you can call me an ideologue or something like that. One of the other factors that I think is misportrayed is our relationship with the Arabs and our desires here. People think that people that want to live in a place like Hebron don't want peace. They say living in Hebron and peace as two opposites that mitnagesh, that collide, and that's not true. Everybody wants peace. And I have two sons that have already served in the army. I have son-in-laws that have served in the army. I'd prefer that there not be any more wars. I like them the way they are. But peace is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. And my goal in Hebron, and I have never said, I've been working as a spokesperson for the community for close to 18 years, I've never said that for us to live here, they have to leave. And that's what they say about us. They say it all the time. There were times when it would have been easier to live with them. It's not easy. But peace has to be a two-way street. But we're not less interested in peace, so to speak, as anybody else. But we want to make sure that there's a peace that's sustainable, that's not suicidal. Those are the first two things that I think of that come to mind. Give me a little bit more time, maybe I'll think of a few more, but those are the first things that come to mind. Yes?
So you talked before a little bit about how it would be unwise to trust our neighbors and to give up land. So, but it seems to me that if we were to do that, then Israel would eventually have to give up between being a Jewish state and a democracy. So, or a democracy. I'm just wondering what your feelings are on that, and if you think both would be possible.
Okay, that's also a very good question. First of all, in terms of giving up land. So forget for a minute the second part of the question about democracy. We'll come back to that. But let's just take a look for a minute at Israel as it is today. Okay, and you people obviously are intelligent and you have an idea of what the maps look like. Up north, we have some really good neighbors up north in southern Lebanon called Hezbollah. Hezbollah today have chemical weapons. And they have missiles that can hit certainly into the middle of the country, if not further. Coming a little bit east of that, we've got the Syrians, and there's a bit of turmoil there today, but they've got at least what Hezbollah has, and they don't like us any more than them. We've had wars with Syria numerous times. We come down from Syria, we come to Jordan, which is still fairly stable. If you ask me to put bets on how stable that kingdom will remain in the next 5 years after Syria falls, I wouldn't put any money on them. We come down to Egypt, which is on the verge of being taken over by the Muslim Brotherhood when they finish the elections there. And they're already talking about changing the peace treaty that Israel signed with them 30 years ago and moving their army back into Sinai. And then, of course, we come down south to Hamas and Gaza, who were democratically elected. And that's what we're surrounded by. And then, of course, we've got the Mediterranean. And that's without the other Arab countries around us, the Iranians, the Iraqis, and everybody else. Take that, and then add to it. Take what is called Yehuda v'Shomron, okay? And take it off of Israel and give it to another enemy who says he doesn't believe in your existence. And you want to know something? Let's, for the sake of argument, say that Abu Mazen has done tshuva. Abu Mazen is sorry, that he helped kill the kids in Kiryat Shmona and Ma'alot, and he already, if he wrote a new PhD, then he wouldn't deny the Holocaust. And he really thinks that he can live together with the Jews. What happens post Abu Mazen? And what happens if Hamas does in Yehuda v'Shomron what they did in Gaza? And the only reason they haven't taken over Yehuda v'Shomron is because the Israeli army stopped it, because they tried. And the fact that there was an Israeli military presence here prevented Hamas from taking over Yehuda v'Shomron. So you can ask yourself, what's the implications of a Palestinian state in Yosh that's taken over either by Hamas or by Maran Barghouti, who was in jail for several life sentences for killing Jews and planning the killing of Jews, or others like him. So what's the implication? So I'll just give you just one little one. I don't know how long where you've traveled around. I didn't ask where you've been, but if you go up north to the area of the Shomron, go up to the hills in the Shomron, and it's all hilly, and you can look west, and on a nice day you see the Mediterranean. Beautiful view from Netanya up north all the way down to Ashkelon and Ashdod. You've got a beautiful view, and if you really look carefully, you can see the planes taking off and landing in Ben Gurion. So Israeli intelligence has already been trying to figure out what to do if, God forbid, we ever give that to them and it becomes part of the Palestinian state, because they have these new little things today. They have a new invention that are called little missiles that you can put on your shoulders and, laser, knock down airplanes with them. They're starting to figure out what to do about it when they start to shoot at Israeli airplanes coming in and out of Ben Gurion. And then you won't ask me about how I feel about security. You'll ask yourselves, am I going to get on an airplane and go to Israel because there are people taking pot shots at airplanes? one plane with 350 people that goes down because somebody hit it from the hills of Shomron, nobody is going to get on an airplane. I promise you. So what's the solution? You want me to tell you the solution is? There's only one. Move the airport. Move the airport down to the Negev. They've started to think about doing that too. Let's move it down to the Negev. That'll be great until the Egyptians move their troops back into the Sinai, and then they can shoot at the airplanes from down there. And that's just one of the implications. Forget the fact that the distance between Kalkilia and Tulkarem and Kfar Saba and Petah Tikva is a few miles. Okay? Literally. Okay? And people forget. If you're interested, and I'm sure I'll give you the names of a few different books and things that you can read. One of them, if you haven't read it, I read it a long time ago, is Arik Sharon's biography, autobiography. And I don't recommend it because I'm a great lover of Arik Sharon. But he discusses in there a period of time that people don't know exists. It's not even they forgot it. It just is never part of, people know about 1967 and 1973. Go back to the 1950s. The 1950s, he writes about, there are chapters about what was going on in Israel in the 1950s when the Feda'in and all sorts of people were coming into Israel from those cities in the Shomron and massacring families in Petah Tikva and Kfar Saba and that whole area. And that's what you're going back to. Okay? That's when you talk about Palestinian state. That's a little bit of Palestinian state. In terms of democracy, first of all, and don't ask me the numbers because I don't have them in my head, but if you're interested in numbers and population and like that, anybody you can play games with statistics and numbers. Anybody can, and everybody does. An expert on the field that I'm familiar with is a guy named Yoram Ettinger. You can look him up on the web. He has numerous articles about population growth in Yosh and in Gaza, and the numbers we're getting from them are highly, highly exaggerated. However, the question still stands. If we have one state, what do you do with the Arabs? And honestly, I'm not 100% sure. My thoughts have shifted a little bit over the last couple of years. And I'm not sure exactly. I understand that it's very problematic to take a person who opposes the state and put him in a Knesset. But that's what we have today. Ahmad Tibi does not believe in the state of Israel. He works for Palestinian Authority. He worked for Arafat, but he's sitting in a Knesset. It's sort of like taking somebody from Al-Qaeda and letting them sit in a Congress. I mean, that's the same thing. A guy that says the United States shouldn't exist, and he might even work to, perpetrate some terror attacks. But, democracy says, let him sit in the Senate, House of Representatives. That's what Israel does. That's what we have today. One of the Israeli Arab Knesset members fled Israel. He was on the verge of being indicted for treason because he'd been passing on Israeli military secrets to Hezbollah during the war up north. So rather than be indicted, he fled, so they wouldn't arrest him. On the other hand, there are those that are proposing today to let anybody who wants within Yosh give him a Tudat Zehut, give him a blue Tudat Zehut, make them citizens of the country, let them vote. Senate. Be another million people voting. You can look at that too. There is another alternative. We don't have today a whole lot of contact with the Arabs in Hebron, but there is a sheikh by the name of Javali. He's the head of the largest clan in Hebron, big, tens of thousands of people that we've had numerous meetings with, who does not pretend to like the existence of the State of Israel, but he has told us that he would prefer to live today as an Israeli in the State of Israel than to have to deal with Palestinian Authority. He prefers the State of Israel to the PA. I don't say that he represents a majority of the Arabs in Yosh, but there are people that follow him, and a lot of them, people that would agree with him, won't open their mouths because if they did, they would kill him. He's still alive because he's a very powerful man and he's got a lot of bodyguards. Otherwise, they threatened to kill him. The first time he had a meeting with Jews in Hebron, they put a fatwa out on him. They canceled it after a few hours because he told them what he was going to do to them if they did. and they're scared of it. But that is a possibility.
Obviously, there's been like a cycle of incitement and violence. How do you see that? Do you see that ending? And if so, how?
In order for, again, it takes two to tango. You can't do it by yourself. Israel, against my opinion and the opinion of many others, went forward with Oslo, gave the Arabs all of the major cities, Arab cities in Yosh, including almost all of Hebron, and the result of that were numerous terrorist attacks. Look, you don't have to just take my word for it. Go into Google and put in Hebron football team or soccer team. Okay, and you can go back. I have it up on the web. I think there was an article in Newsweek about a soccer team in Hebron that all turned into suicide bombers, and they went and they blew themselves up all over Israel. And the reason they were able to do that was because Israel had given Hebron, the security of Hebron, to the PA. And there were no Israeli security forces. And it didn't just happen in Hebron. You had huge terrorist nests that grew up in Jenin and in Tulkarem and all cities up in the Shomron. And they were killing Jews all over the place. The cycle of violence can end when, first of all, our neighbors accept the fact that we have a legitimate right to be here. And they don't. And when I say a legitimate right to be here, I'm not talking about Hebron. I'm talking about Tel Aviv. I have a map in my office of Palestine. It's behind me on the wall. And sometimes I figure out that journalists that are awake when somebody says, "What are you doing with the map of Palestine on your wall?" I say, "Oh, okay, you see it? Oh, very good, you're awake." I say, "So who printed it?" It's printed in Bethlehem by the PA. I said, "So what's it a map of?" Map of the State of Israel. Tel Aviv is Tel Al-Arabi. They still don't accept it. And as long as they don't accept it and they think that they can get it, and whatever means possible they'll use because the ends justify the means, and they think that if they push long enough, they've made tremendous gains. The terror has worked. Israel continues to acquiesce to terror, all types of terror. Not just the terror that you talk about, people taking out guns and shooting. There's international terror. Bibi today is capitulating because of terror that's coming out of the European Union and The Hague. And things that aren't true. International law that isn't law. But he's afraid. It works. Terror works. And as long as Israel continues to acquiesce to that terror and the terrorists understand that, then they're going to keep using it. Because they think in the end they'll win.
So what do you mean by international law that isn't law?
Today, there's a document that the Israeli Foreign Ministry put up a number of years ago on their website discussing civilians living in Yosh, Yudah v'Shomron. Okay? They all say it's illegal. They say it's against the Fourth Geneva Accords. And it's not true. It's very simply not true. Okay? What Israel is doing in Yosh has absolutely nothing to do with what's in the Geneva Accords. But because in England they threatened to arrest Israeli politicians like Tzipi Livni and like that, and now the Attorney General is putting out documents saying that Netanyahu and Barak could be tried as war criminals in The Hague if they let Jews live here, if they let Jews live there. So he's folding.
So then, what's your opinion of the argument that it's breaking international law, and then why is that argument wrong?
Well, it's not breaking international law. First of all, you can read the document if you want. I can send you the links. You can email me, and I'll send you the links to the document, which prove 100% that that Israel isn't breaking international law. But if you want to talk about, let's say, occupation. I don't know. Let's go back to 1921-22, when the League of Nations gave the British a mandate to form a national home for the Jewish people here. And you know what the borders of that were. The borders of that included southern Lebanon, Syria, Jordan hadn't been invented yet. That was all part of the east side of the Jordan River, was part of the whole thing, was all Israel. And that's what the League of Nations said. The League of Nations was a internationally recognized organization. Following World War II, and the League of Nations fell apart, so you had the United Nations, which on November 29th, 1947, tried to partition this land. Okay, the Jews didn't like it, but they said yes. The Arabs didn't like it, and they said no, and they declared war on us with the intentions of finishing what Hitler had started. They wanted to destroy us. They were going to push whatever was left, they were going to just delete us. Didn't work. After between 1948 and 1967, all of Yosh was conquered and occupied by Jordan. They occupied it. Okay, they were never given any legal rights to it, but they occupied it. In 1967, we came back here, and it's also very, very interesting to know, if you're not familiar with it, that when the Six-Day War broke out, the Prime Minister then, Levi Eshkol, sent Golda Meir and a few other Israeli politicians, leaders, to Hussein to plead with him to keep from entering the war. And Hussein's answer to that was to start shelling Jerusalem. So, he attacked us, and we came down through Yosh. We came back to Beit Lechem, we came to Hebron, we went up north, to Shomron. At that time, this was all had been under Jordanian occupation. Israel moved in. In 1974-75, the Jordanians relinquished any legal rights that they said they had to this. So who are we occupying it from? Like, who does it belong to in terms of international law that they say, well, you can't live here, you're a Jew? Who are we occupying it from? The Jordanians said, we don't want it. What other legal body did the international community accept to say, well, it belongs to them? 1967. There is none. Okay, the PA was created many years afterwards, and it's still a very amorphous organization. It's still not clear whether they're going to hold together or not.
Given the incredibly long history of Jewish residence here, I'm just curious, besides sort of the direct incitement of the Mufti at the time right before the massacre, what changed? Why all these years of relative peace suddenly?
Well, first of all, it wasn't like that. I alluded to that. I didn't go into great detail. But everything wasn't cozy here. Okay? The Jews didn't live here well. There were a lot of problems. But there's nothing you could do about it. First of all, you had the Jewish population here. I don't have numbers from all of the years. Obviously, there were times when there were a very small number of groups of people here. We know about Jews that were here just from things that were written from travelers, both Jewish and Christian, 800 years ago or 900 years ago and like that. From the middle of the 1500s, we have better records. The Jews that moved in here from Turkey. And the Ashkenazim came in the end of the 1700s, the beginning of the 1800s. But they didn't live. Relationship with the Arabs wasn't good. Okay, the level of animosity basically depended at that time on the Arab leaders. There were some that were a little worse, and there were some that were a little better. But they didn't live great lives together. In the early 1900s, and then afterwards, during World War I, everything fell apart. The Turks were afraid that the people here were going to participate and cooperate with the British. There was a lot of balagan, there was famine, there was no food, there was nothing, and the populations all fell apart. The Jewish population of Hebron, I saw an atlas once, if I'm not mistaken, and I didn't make a copy of it, I should have, but there were going back to the early 1900s, there were 7,000 people in Hebron, 2,000 who were Jewish. But that fell apart, that changed. During World War I, following World War I, the numbers in 1929, we figure there were somewhere between 700 to maybe 1,000 Arab Jews in Hebron. Don't know how many Arabs were here. But things changed. The principal catalyst of the change was Haj Amin Husseini, who was a real Jew hater. Okay, and there are books that have been written in the last few years, in the last 5 years. There are books that have been written about Haj Amin Husseini and his relationships with Hitler, and that also Jews started to come back. They're talking about the beginning, first, second, third Aliyah. They saw Jews coming back, and you had this wave of nationalism which went through them also, and that all came together and brought about. And then the last on that was the fact the British were here, and the British are very anti-Semitic. And despite the fact that the mandate they had was one, they just did whatever they wanted to do. They changed the whole mandate. And they sat numerous times. Also post World War II, they just sat and watched the Arabs massacre Jews here. They didn't give a damn. And I'm giving you very general things. There are books that are written about this stuff, go into details. And you can pick them up and read them. They're very interesting. They're also very sad.
You said that you don't think peace, means is living in Hebron, and that sort of what's stopping peace is food, and there's been so many attacks. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Goldstein in 1994 and their implications of Jewish attacks.
Look, many times, I suppose that's also an answer to the question that this woman asked me before, also in terms of misconceptions. Goldstein was one person. I think probably you can count on maybe 1.5 hands the number of Jews who have basically, as we would say, taken the law into their hands and used weapons in ways that can be considered illegitimate. Okay? That I can't justify that by saying, but also just keep in mind that there have been hundreds of Arabs that have done the same thing. Okay? We shouldn't compare and say, well, Jews have Goldstein and put him on the scale, and that's equal to everything the Arabs have done. Baruch Goldstein came down to Hebron, and according to just about everything we know, he went into Marat Machpelah and he started shooting people. It's difficult for me to know what everybody thinks about him in their hearts and their heads. I think that a lot of people that knew him make a distinction between the Baruch Goldstein they knew before Purim of 1994 and the Baruch Goldstein they knew after Purim of 1994. He was a doctor. He saved a lot of people's lives. He worked very hard, and kanireh that he broke. I don't know, we don't have anything in writing. He didn't leave anything to tell us why he went and he did it. There are all sorts of conjecture, there are all sorts of possibilities, but I think what I can say almost 100% is that his method of trying to solve problems has not been accepted. It's rejected by just about everybody here, Hebron and Kiryat Arba, for the simple reason people don't do it. Everybody's armed. Everybody down here is armed. We're licensed to carry weapons either by the Ministry of the Interior or by the IDF. And anybody who wants to take an M16 and go outside and start shooting people can do it. There's nothing to stop anybody from going outside and just pulling the trigger. But people don't do it. And that says more to me than anything else. The fact that people don't do that, if people accepted what he did as a way to deal with the problems we have, and we had very, very serious problems here. But if people thought that was the way to deal with them, they would do it. The fact that people don't do it says to me more than anything else.
Quick follow-up question then. If then it means that the responsibility that Jews have to maintain peace is almost the fact that fewer of them are attacking is the ground to peace.
I don't understand the question.
Like the fact that the responsibility we have for peace and maintaining, inhabitants
in Hebron is legitimized by the fewer attacks of Jews on Palestine?
No, you asked me a particular question about Baruch Goldstein. That's all I relate to. How did
the larger context of even though an individual attack and what it means for peace, and why it's not inconsistent with peace attacks?
I didn't say it's inconsistent with peace. Peace isn't a word. Peace is, you talk about peace has to be defined. I don't know how people here define the word peace. Does it mean that we all live together and sleep together, or does it mean that, we don't fight with each other, or what is it? It's a very, very amorphous kind of a term. You can say that peace is the absence of war. You have hot, warm peace, and you have cold peace. We've been at peace with the Egyptians for 30 years. People call it a cold peace because the countries never really warmed up to each other diplomatically, despite the fact that Israel did a tremendous amount with both Sadat and Mubarak behind the scenes. But there's never been any kind of lovey-dovey situation with the Egyptians. The Americans and the Israelis are at peace, even though Obama did his best to snub Netanyahu, and his first chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, said some very nasty things to Israelis when he came into power. But that doesn't mean that we're at war with them. There's peace. But sometimes, it fluctuates the relationships. Peace has to be dependent on first of all on recognition and legitimacy. The people that we're dealing with still don't give us any recognition of legitimacy. They still don't think we should be here. They don't want us here. And I'm not talking about Hebron. They don't want us in Israel. Period. And Hebron, as far as they're concerned, is a little spot on the map. They don't give a damn about Hebron, and I'll tell you a secret, they don't give a damn about Yerushalayim either. What they care about is Haifa and Beersheba and Tel Aviv, and Tzfat, and Ramla. They say it all belongs to them. They say it. They believe it, and they want it back. It goes deeper than that. Okay? There's a girls' school across the street here, an Arab girls' school, right above Beit Hadassah, and the name of the school is Cordova. Ring a bell? Cordova. You people are all Ivy League, no? What was Cordova? Huh? It's not a mosque in Spain. It was the capital of Islamic Spain. Cordova was the capital of Islamic Spain going back before Ferdinand and Isabella. For a few, I don't know how many years, 300-400 years. The Muslims took over Spain. Spain was an Islamic state. Cordova was the capital. So, why in Hebron is there an Arab school named Cordova? So I'll tell you the answer. Because the best way to keep a memory alive, in Judaism, as a rule, there are exceptions to the rule. Tradition, you name people, kids, after relatives that have passed on to the next world. Why does a parent name his child after his grandfather or his mother or his great aunt or something? Keep the memory alive. I really love my Auntie Ruth, so I call my daughter Ruthie. Why did the Arabs call the school here Cordova? To keep the memory alive, because they still think it belongs to them. And if you think that I'm crazy, okay, so then take a look. You can find it up on the web. You remember that a few years ago when Al-Qaeda blew up the trains in Madrid, a few hundred people were killed? So the terrorists who purportedly did that released statements as why they did it. Why did they blow up the trains in Spain? What did they give a damn about Madrid? Because they said, you thought that you could do what you did to us and we weren't going to take revenge? What were they talking about? They were talking about what the Spanish had done to them 500 years before, when they threw them out. I think it still belongs to them. They want it back. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you think that the situation here in Hebron, like H1, H2, is tenable, or like will work in the future, or like how long it's going for?
You people are good. I mean, you ask very good, focused questions. Is it tenable? Of course not. Of course it's not tenable. The Hebron Accords, when they were signed, called for an open city. The Hebron Accords that were signed, keep in mind they were signed by Israel, Arafat, and Washington, state specifically that Hebron would be an open city. It's not. One of the things that you haven't asked me about yet, you would have if we switched the order of what you're doing today, but one of the things you haven't asked me about is, or maybe you're just too polite, people talk about apartheid in Hebron. There's a Hebron Apartheid Week, which basically runs out of people out in South Africa. Excuse me. And it's true, there is apartheid in Hebron, but it's a little different from the way people usually picture it. That goes along with your question about misconceptions. I, as a Jew in Hebron today, and I'm not exaggerating the numbers, they're real. I, as a Jew today in Hebron, have access to 3% of the city. The Arabs in Hebron have access to 97% of the city. The only place in Hebron where an Arab can't walk down the street is from outside Beit Hadassah. There's stairs that go up, down the street about 1 kilometer. That's the only place in Hebron they can't walk. Otherwise, they have access to the entire city. I have access from the Tomb of the Patriarchs, coming down this street, going up to Tel Almeida. That's all I've got. I can't go anywhere else. So people say, yeah, but all the stores are closed. And it's true. There were Arab stores that were closed on this side of the city. Not by us. We don't have anything to say about things like that. They were closed by the IDF for security reasons, because people have been killed. There was a suicide bomber that blew himself up. He killed 2 people. He missed a group of about 50 people by a few meters. We were very lucky. There were people that had been shot at. There were acid attacks. There were stabbings. There were all sorts of things that happened. It's gone through the Israeli Supreme Court twice. The Israeli Supreme Court is not right-wing. They're not lovers of Jewish Hebron. But they don't automatically accept whatever the army says to them. It's gone through the Supreme Court twice, and they've left it. Because it's a security threat. It's a real security threat. The fact that today most of the city is off limits to us is... I see it as I don't even have words to describe it. I think that Hebron should be open city. It's not. Is it tenable? Look, that's the way we live today. Will it change? Yes. When will it change and how will it change? I have no idea. It could be in another year. It could be in another 10 years. I don't think it'll remain this way forever, though.
So we need to wrap up in a minute, and we want to give you some time for some closing remarks. But I wanted to ask you before that a 2-part question. The first is, as you know, J Street is a 2-state advocacy organization.
Really? No, I didn't know.
So, in a very fundamental way, we obviously have some differences of opinion, but there are also many within Israel who believe that a 2-state resolution is either inevitable or necessary, including whether he thinks it's necessary. He's stated his support of it, the current Prime Minister. So the first question is, in the context of a 2-state accord, what happens to the community here? And then the second question is, while you describe the situation here from a security perspective as okay in relationship to times in the past, there are obviously places in Israel that are less fraught, less difficult to live. And so I'm curious why you choose to put yourself and your family in harm's way, given the circumstances.
Well, first of all, let's start with the 2-state solution. First of all, I also believe in a 2-state solution. There's a place in Texas called Palestine. We get this, they get that. You're not supposed to be laughing. There are a lot of, today, it's very interesting because there are a lot of, not a lot, but there are some major Israeli politicians who are starting to publicly say that the idea of a two-state solution is all over. People that you'd be surprised to hear them say it publicly. Okay, Gideon Sa'ar, who's the education minister, he's center-right, but he's a minister in Netanyahu's government, and Netanyahu has said certain things and has gone in certain ways. He's come out and publicly said that the idea of a two-state solution is not tenable. And there are others that are saying the same thing. People are starting to understand that it's not going to work. Okay? And if you ask me, it will never happen. I don't believe that Israel will ever, despite what Netanyahu has said and what the others say, I don't think it will ever happen. I've learned never say never, but I really don't think it's going to happen. In terms of what happens to Hebron if, God forbid, Elohim Gadol, I have no idea what's going to happen here. But today you're not just talking about Hebron as an isolated place. It's not what's going to happen to Hebron. What's going to happen to Hebron, and Kiryat Arba, and Shiloh, and Beit El, and Ariel, and Gush Etzion, and all of us. There are a lot of people. We're talking about over 300,000 people. So I ask you, what's going to happen to us? They're going to put us in camps? They couldn't figure out what to do with 10,000 people from Gush Katif. There's still people that don't have anywhere to live. They put them in these little caravan things that fall apart in the rain. And they were going to build them all communities. They still don't have them. 7 years later. So what are they going to do with us? They can put us in, they can, build these, camps and put barbed wire around them and put us in there. But if they have no place else to put us, but I don't expect it to happen. You ask about me. Okay, so you said you have to finish? Okay, so a few things, a few last points, and then I'll tell you a little bit about me. When we finish, I've got business cards. I'll hand out the cards. My email's on there, my phone number's on there. You're going to hear from people that think in a little different direction from me. What I tell journalists when I start to talk to them, and I also know they're talking to our neighbors across the street, is that they don't have to, when people can speak in two different ways. They can talk about opinions and they can talk about facts. Opinions, people can say whatever they want to say. Mine is worth what his is, and we think whatever we think. Facts are facts. And just because I say, this morning I woke up and looked out the window and saw a pink elephant flying through the sky, doesn't mean that it really happened. Find somebody who has a picture of it. When you hear things that people say, doesn't mean that they happened just because they said that it happened. You can ask for proof. Somebody shows you a movie, maybe it happened, but ask them when it happened, when the movie was filmed. What was the background, what was cut from this end and that end. You don't have to take any fact that I've given you as gospel. You can check it. I don't have anything to lie about. You catch a mistake, let me know. But the same thing is true with anybody else you listen to, be it here in Hebron or anywhere else. In terms of myself, what I'm doing here, look, I came to Israel in 1974 on a one-year program at Hebron University. Planned to go back, go to law school. I had no idea what these things were. Certainly didn't walk around with one of these things on my head. And by the time that year was over, I had more or less decided to come back. I went back to graduate. I mean, as soon as I graduated, I came back, basically stayed. I moved with my wife, married an Israeli in 1979. We moved to Kiryat Arba in 1981 because we wanted to contribute to something that we believed in. We knew that there was a need for people in Yehuda v'Shomron, at that time Gaza. We looked, found a place in Kiryat Arba. We didn't have any money. We found something cheap and moved there and lived there for 17 years. I started working here 18 years ago, and we moved down here to Beit Hadassah almost 14 years ago. And we live here because it's Hebron. We live here because if we're not here, we know what happens to Hebron. It's true, there are places where you could say perhaps maybe it's a little safer. I also don't buy that, because today, unfortunately, things, Baruch Hashem, are relatively quiet. But, there were bombs, there were missiles flying from southern Lebanon into Tzfat and Tiberia, and there were missiles coming into Ashkelon and Ashdod, and coming up almost as far as Kiryat Gat from Gaza. So, and bombs blew up all over the country. So I don't know if, you put things on a scale. It looks more dangerous here. It sounds more dangerous here. Is it really more dangerous here? To live in Hebron is a privilege. To live where Avraham Avinu lived, where David HaMelech lived, this is the roots. This is where we started. This is it. To be able to walk here in this city where Jews 60, 70 years ago didn't even dream of, is tremendous privilege. It's tremendous obligation, because I want to make sure that my great-great-grandchildren can be here too. But it's tremendous privilege to be able to be here. I think that Israel is still fighting the war of independence, and this is part of it. And unfortunately, in wars there are casualties. But either you're willing to pay the price, or else you're not there. And where do we have to go? We don't have anywhere to go. Okay? Nobody else in the world wants us anywhere else. This is it. So we're here. And Hebron, you take a tree, chop off the roots, what happens to the tree? This is the roots. The last thing I'll leave you people with is just one last thing. There's one thing, you people all obviously care about Israel. You're on the ball, you understand what's going on. You're much more on the ball than a lot of the people that I speak to down here. And probably there's one thing you may know also. And there's one thing that Israel needs more than anything else. Okay, it's true that with our relationships with all the different countries, and we need money, and we need this and that, the thing we need more than anything else is people. We need good people to live in Israel. When I was here in 1974 and people used to give me Aliyah speeches, I got very upset with them, because I was an American, and I was going to go back and live in the States. And I learned to understand why Jews have to be in Israel. And it makes no difference to me what your political persuasion is, whether you think the way I think, the way somebody else thinks, it makes no difference. We need in Israel good people. That's the way we're going to keep this country going. That's the way we're going to keep this country growing. That's the way we're going to build the country. And, people, when I was a student here, and they would ask people why they didn't want to make Aliyah, and I remember there were friends of mine, this is many, many years ago, 40 years ago, they would say, well, we don't like the way it is. And I didn't like that answer. I said, I'm an American, I'm not an Israeli, that's where I live. But if you don't like it, that's the reason you're not going to come here, then do something about it. Come back and change it. And Israel is still a small state, and people can change things. People can make an influence. Okay? Without patting myself on the back, in my particular work and the things that I do, I've made a difference. Not a big difference. I haven't changed the world. But everybody makes a little bit of a difference in the things they do. And what we need more than anything else are people like you. People that are smart, that have good heads on their shoulders, and they want to do something. You obviously want to do something, you wouldn't be here. You're willing to listen, and you're willing to open up your heads and think. And I have no doubt you're really able to go out and do something. And that's what we need. So you're all in school, you're all still in university, fine. Go back, graduate, the next month, get on an airplane and come back. That's what we need more than anything else. And anybody that decides they want to come make Aliyah, give me a phone call, let me know. There's nothing that makes me happier than knowing that somebody just made Aliyah. B'atzlacha. Anybody that wants, B'akasha, have a card. It's got my blogs and my email and whatever else you want.
A huge thank you to David. I can also, being on your email list for a number of years now, I can say you're a prolific writer, and it's definitely worth signing up for the email list to hear regularly about what's going on at Hebron. And I also want to particularly thank you and an apology that Dave canceled his Hebron Sorcery this morning to be with us on Wingle thing. So thank you for taking the time and an apology that the nation missed.
Anybody wants to come back, I know what people like it when they come back for more. But very seriously, if you have any time, I don't know how much longer you're going to be here, or people come back on different trips. We have tours that aren't just sitting and talking, seeing things. And Hebron is a fascinating place. Forget the politics, forget everything. Just as a Jewish place, it's fascinating. If you haven't seen any of it, come back and we'll do a real tour. So, sure.
Thank you so much. Back to us.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
I got to pass where we started this fall. Thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Sorry that we were late.
No, it's okay. Look, as long as we got in what we could get in.